GM everyone, super happy to have you all listening to us today for the Pyth Data Driven 2023, the first Pyth Developer Conference. I'm Marc from the Pyth Data Association, and we're on for 45 minutes, an AMA with two brains from Douro Labs, a core contributor to the Pyth network. We have Mike and Jayant. Before into getting the AMA, would you mind both presenting yourself? Because maybe some missed the first two keynotes from yourselves. So Mike, if you don't mind going first.
I don't mind. Great to be here with you, Marc. So my name is Mike Cahill. I'm the CEO of Douro Labs. Prior to Douro Labs, I was at Jump, in Jump Crypto in particular. But I have got a over 15-year career of doing sales and trading in mostly the FX markets at a bunch of different companies. So I started off at Morgan Stanley out of college, and that was for sales and trading when there was like kind of still voice trading, and that became electronic. And then I went to systematic trading because that was sort of the trend at the time. And so I was at KCG, which is now owned by Virtu. And it was great to understand the differences between like what happens and what's important for a bank to be successful versus a independent non-credit issuing institution like a trading firm. And then basically I got into crypto in 2017 and I got hooked. I started trading, was really drawn in first on like the opportunities and arbitrages. I also loved the idea that it allowed for a whole new set of innovations within financial markets. Like I had seen the wave of electronification in FX, and it was sort of mature at that point. What crypto allowed was us to be able to really innovate and redesign everything kind of from first principles. The first one that gave me the kind of the eye opener that this could be something huge was when I did my very first on-chain trade. So I used Ether Delta, and basically the whole world opened up to me. I said, I understood that things were possible just using an online protocol, not having to go through an exchange, being able to remove some of the clunkiness. It felt a lot like the electronification of the banking industry in the same way that Web 1 was the electronification of the publishing industry. And so I became involved in a number of ways. At Jump Crypto, I was focused on doing some partnerships. And then Jump was an early participant and kind of creator of the Pyth network, along with some other trading firms and exchanges. And I helped lead that process. And then earlier this year, we formed Douro Labs, Jayant, myself, and Karen as the three co-founders with a very impressive team. And our primary objective is to contribute to the Pyth network today. We think that given the growth, it was the right time to go and do this independently. And it's more than enough as a full-time job for us to focus on Pyth. Over to you, Jayant.
I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Jayant. I'm the CTO of Douro Labs, also a co-founder along with Mike. My background is, my traditional background is I have a PhD in, computer science, studying machine learning and natural language processing. I used to work on kind of dialogue models, kind of like ChatGPT, maybe before it was all hyped up right now. But that's my traditional background. I actually was part of a startup. We got acquired by Microsoft. I've had a whole career over there. But the whole time I've been interested in crypto in the background. So I first got involved in crypto when I was still in grad school, actually, back in 2014, when I started doing programmatic trading of cryptocurrencies out of my apartment. And you've got to realize that this is 2014. This is early, right? This is before Coinbase had an exchange. This is before any professionals were trading the tokens. So I did pretty well by myself, right? For a number of years. I got out of the programmatic trading around 2018, around the time, Mike and the pros came in and started eating my lunch. But I've been involved with the space. I've been watching everything going on, understood some of the promise of the technology, understood things like Ethereum, that kind of thing. But the whole time when I was trading, the development story was kind of vaporware, right? You didn't really see anybody building actual applications on the blockchain that did anything. So I kind of came back around and started working in crypto professionally around 2020 when someone showed me Compound. And I was just like, oh, like now is the time, you know, this promise is actually here. You can build applications on the blockchain that solve real problems. And I was hooked with it. I wanted to do something in the space. I got connected to Jump Crypto through a friend. So I joined Jump Crypto, started working on Pyth, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am today.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for the walk down memory lane. And two things you kind of mentioned both is more the customer, like the user facing aspect. So Mike was the trading, and actually also for you, Jayant. How did you end up more on the backend infrastructure of DeFi and not just a regular customer facing protocol?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, you know, I think there are a lot of different places where you can contribute to the crypto ecosystem. So I don't think that building infrastructure is necessarily the only place where, you know, I could have ended up, right? I think some of this is happenstance that, you know, I started working on Pyth, but I think that infrastructure is a really interesting place to be. First of all, because it's clear that we really do need better infrastructure in order to build applications that people that actually are good enough for people to use, right? So if you go back to 2020 and you look at the state of Ethereum, which was the only blockchain with real DeFi at the time, then it's clear that that experience isn't going to work for the majority of applications, right? And similarly for oracles, right? If you have an oracle that updates every 10 minutes, you know, that's simply not fast enough updates to power some of the financial applications that people want to build. So I think infrastructure is still a really important area for investment, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, we're working on it at Douro.
Yeah, I have a similar answer. When I was at Jump and we were looking at the potential bottlenecks, we looked at everything. Like, what are going to be the slow blockchains? What are the problems with slow blockchains? About being able to make applications that we're excited about within Web3. And we went through all the things from bridging to oracles to different types of design space like layer 2s and what was possible. This is at 2020 actually. And we looked at the current state of affairs with oracles and realized that there was so much inherent latency, and that was going to be a huge bottleneck. Then removing the latency from sourcing was one element to it. Because of the way that the model had worked, it was basically calling third-party data. Now, there was this other realization that if you're at a trading firm, one of your biggest expenses is actually paying for market data. And so when we looked at this, we realized that it seemed like there was some naivete going on there. It seemed like there was a little bit of a Napster business model emerging with the assumption that, you know, like if you bought the CD, you have the unlimited distribution of the digital rights. And that was naive at the time for Napster. And it turns out, like, you know, if you can't just distribute it in an uncontrolled way if you bought one CD. And so the digital music needed a business model that worked for the single usage or for some sort of a licensing model. And so we realized that this was, you know, such a big, important problem, and it was probably only going to get solved if you either had the exchanges already signed up, or if you can come up with a new set of data that had not been used before. It has never been done, and that was what attracted me. So I had worked at, you know, a bank. I worked at a trading firm, and I really understood some of the limitations of being in a trading firm. And actually worked at an exchange before I went to Jump Crypto. I worked at SIBO. And I understood these different lenses and how businesses are built across different asset classes. And I felt like this was a fun problem to be able to solve. Like, it was a totally new take. It solved really two different problems at the same time. And if you put some really smart people on it and the incentives are aligned, then you can solve it in a way that is going to be really exciting, and it can happen really quickly, and it can escalate really quickly. And that's sort of the way that I feel about it. You know, trading is a very dynamic environment. There's a lot of people, like smart people, that like to do this for the competitive elements of it, but building is the same way, especially building in Web3. It allows you to see the impact of what you've built very quickly. If people don't like it, you kind of fall on deaf ears. Crypto Twitter is an immediate reaction to whether or not people like what you're doing. So it's been a really exciting experience to move from sort of those trading worlds into kind of this building in this infrastructure space, and I really love it now.
What's super, I think, interesting is you mentioned 2020, so it's almost like 3 years ago, like this journey from zero to, I think today, one of the leading Oracle for DeFi, like available on 40 blockchains, 90 publishers. Of this whole journey, what, let's say, have you learned from this? And maybe what would you have done differently, Mike?
Well, I've learned that you should take things incrementally, and you should make sure that you scale into them. So for better or for worse, a lot of the people that work in the Pyth network are from trading firms and financial kind of institutions. They all share typically one thing in common when it comes to marketing. You're basically instructed from your very first job that if you talk to the media, you're going to get fired. And if you work at a systematic trading firm, you're actually instructed that if you talk to the media, somebody else is going to figure out the secret to your trade, and then they're going to eat your lunch. So we have been referred to as like an overnight success that took 3 years to build. And I think that there's some sort of truth to it, because a lot of the people didn't know about Pyth who now know about it today. Things like the retrospective airdrop, some of the marketing that's been around the governance, and just increasing the sort of the megaphone that Pyth has become such an integral part of blockchains. 25% of applications are using Pyth, but they have been, right? And it's been growing pretty quickly. So we approached this from the standpoint of build, and then if you do a good job of building, people will find out sooner or later. And at certain points, that was really difficult, because we built something that we thought was 10x better than the nearest competitor. And for a long time, we had been pigeonholed to, oh, it's just available on Solana, even after we had kind of gone cross-chain. And we were sort of fighting those battles. I talked about this in my initial keynote, like that period of time from like emerging from Solana to PythNet and going to those first 14 blockchains was a big grind, like having to convince everyone to use a new model, to pull from PythNet, get them to understand what were the trust assumptions that they were taking into account, understanding the transparency elements of using PythNet, and all the benefits that you get from it, from having this repository of 400 symbols that were available on so many different blockchains. All that stuff took a really long time. It was a huge grind. And when I look back, it was the right thing to do. It was just like developing Pyth, right? We knew it was going to be a much harder solution to the problem. Like the Oracle problem, when most easily described, you think about it intuitively, like, oh, just go get the data from the internet and just pull it on chain. And that's what the first oracles did. And then when you look at it, you're like, well, this is going to break when you start to incorporate data from intellectually property protected data sets like US equities or futures or FX or commodities. And so you need to have a much more difficult and more robust architecture. It's going to take a long time to build. Like we had 5 publishers day one, scaled up to 65 in the first year. But again, it was a grind, and it wasn't a product offering until there were at least 10 to 20 institutions that were involved. So having a long-term patient view on building a product and a product first before the marketing, I think has been so powerful to what is now possible today. Like when the token was eventually available to deposit onto exchanges, it was all coordinated very quickly. And the reason for it is because 10 of those exchanges were already publishers in the Pyth network. It's not like there was a team that was going out and had to start these new relationships and say, oh, this would be great if the token was available for users to deposit there. It's just they already knew the network, and they said, you know what, we want to support this. We're going to do this on our own. There was very little coordination that needed to be done. Likewise with market makers and traders, they're all part of the network. So when you build this huge asset base, you can do things very quickly, but it takes a long time. You need to have a really long-term vision. Some of the stuff, Jayant just announced about 5 new product line improvements. All of that stuff is the function of us working so long on building this asset base. So I'm happy we did it, although when I look back, it was really difficult at times to be underappreciated because we didn't have marketing bones in our body.
think you hit a few great points there. And you want to add anything, Jayant, or we keep going?
I'll say a little bit about, some of the technology because, for me anyway, I hadn't done any real blockchain development before starting to work on Pyth. So I've definitely learned a lot more about, the software, the actual tech that powers all these different chains. As Pyth, being on so many different blockchains, we've learned a lot about, different runtimes and things like that. So I think that has definitely been a really interesting experience and kind of like seeing, what ecosystems do well and what ecosystems do poorly has been really really edifying for me. I think if I had to do one thing differently, I think one thing that has become really clear to me today, which wasn't clear to me starting out, is that there really is there's going to be an interplay between on-chain and off-chain, computation, right? Not everything's going to run on the blockchain because it's just too expensive. So I think thinking about, what parts of the app need to be on the blockchain and what parts don't, and how to do that split is going to be really, really important. And I think, with Pyth, we have this poll model, which kind of has this sort of, interplay between the PythNet data, right, which is a blockchain, and then the signed payloads, which come off that blockchain, which go onto other chains. But I think like thinking about some of those things up front could have been really valuable for Pyth. Like maybe we could have gotten here a little bit faster.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. And now let's get onto the submitted questions from the patrons directly. And actually, we're going to take one live here. And maybe, Mike, somehow you touched upon this. Question is, what is something the wider crypto community gets wrong about Pyth? So I feel it aligns a bit with your marketing review. Anything else you feel that we should clean the slate on?
Yeah, it used to be. I mean, if you asked me like 6 months ago, it was definitely that Pyth was only on Solana. I think we've probably gotten people over that hurdle because 45 blockchains is a long way to really reinforce that it's not just one. I think that people sort of underestimate the nuance in the architecture difference. It's often that Pyth gets compared to other oracles, but the architecture is so vastly different. So the Pyth network consists of publishers in network, right? So these are publishers who are publishing directly to PythNet. There's about 100 of them. They're institutions. They're they're accessing a blockchain every single day. About almost 400 symbols that are in scope of what's being published. I don't think people can understand and appreciate the scale that goes into this. It's just like, oh yeah, of course there's data on the blockchain. There's other ways of getting data on the blockchain, but building it in this way is very unusual and allows Pyth to do things that I don't think people anticipated. And that is what I think is really the superpower behind it. It's the fact that there are no weak foundations within the network. There's really only this strength. If half the publishers wanted to leave the network, you still have another half. There's another 50, but these are all independent institutions. It's not like we've built a set of nodes who are going out and taking data from CoinGecko. CoinGecko goes down, maybe 50 of those nodes would stop pricing. That's not the case with Pyth. In Pyth, each one of these institutions publishing their own prices directly. So I think that isn't yet well understood. People are starting to understand that Pyth is fast, it's quite scalable, it has the same product offering on every single chain, and it has the ability to remove any of the latencies inherent with the block times of those chains, given its architecture. But I don't think people have really fully gotten that yet.
Thanks a lot for the answer. And actually, I think we might continue a couple more questions on publisher. A few questions ask, like specifically, why exchange XYZ is not yet a publisher to the Pyth network. Would you mind bringing us through the journey of what does the Pyth network get of having more publishers, and why would a publisher become a publisher to the network?
Yeah, why don't I take the second part of that actually, and then I can go over to Jayant and you can talk a little bit about the robustness and resiliency of adding more publishers just generally, because you obviously talked about it with the increase to 64 publishers per symbol. Okay, so there's 100 institutions. How do we decide these institutions were the right ones? And there's about 4 that get added every single month. What could we expect in the future? So each one has been a sort of a narrative fit. The big trading firms for a long time have trouble reconciling the fact that market data is one of the biggest expenses that they have from a trading business. And the way that they tend to think about this is they submit all their bids and offers to the exchange, they have all their trades, and then that data that they've created and sent over to the exchange in form of bids and offers gets sold back to them. And you just get this like huge frustration around this weird nuance within the traditional financial markets where these trading firms just don't get paid anything for their market data and they have to buy it back, and they feel like the fees just go up and it's extractive every single year. So the narrative for Pyth hit first with these trading firms, and they're like, this is a great potential to solve the Oracle problem, but also for us to now start monetizing this data for the first time. And then we saw smaller exchanges also agreed, like they don't make money. MIEX, IEX, MEMX don't really make money from financial market data. Then crypto exchanges, they sort of get it. They don't really make money from market data either. There's not a whole lot of money that gets paid for crypto market data yet today. FX, like they sort of we have some representation. The biggest change for me was when SIBO joined a year ago, and SIBO does make a lot of money from financial market data. It makes about $500 million a year selling data. Now, when you can get someone of that caliber to join the network, it's a validation that they think that this is going to become a market that has a big revenue opportunity for them, and they believe in their distribution, and they believe in the confidence of the data that they have. They're viewing this as, look, we're a big market data player. There's a lot of others here who are, new market data players, and rather than just trying to like boycott and pretend that the marketplace doesn't exist, we're going to join. We're going to be one of the first big institutions that makes money joining, and we're going to contribute data, and this is going to be potentially a new greenfield for us, and we're going to be there super, super early. I think that we're going to start to see more and more institutions that think like this as well, and it's just a matter of whether or not it's clicked, and then have they cleared all the hurdles for getting comfortable with dealing with blockchains. And so, as things become unblocked, like, there's a reputational element to all of this. And so as more and more publishers join the network, it goes from being something that's risky to almost being something that there's a bit of FOMO around. Like, if you're not a publisher in the Pyth network, are you even a big trading firm? Like, there's that element to it. So we started to see a lot of inbounds from that. We will start to, I would expect us to see expansion of sort of the SIBO category of publishers into the network. I know there's been a lot of conversations, experimentation with some. As I said before, it's Pyth's model to do the work first and then go shout about it, as opposed to shouting about potentially doing the work in the future. All right, Jayant, why don't you tell us about the robustness of just what does it mean when we add more publishers?
Yeah, so I think publishers are really important to the network in 2 different ways. And the first one, robustness, you touched on, I'll go into that. But the other way that they're really important is actually just access to the data that people want, right? So one of the reasons that Pyth has so many different publishers is that different publishers have access to prices for different things. If you're a big TradFi trading firm, maybe you have access to US equities prices, but you don't have access to like, Dogecoin or whatever degen crypto thing people are trading right now, right? Whereas there's also these like DeFi trading shops who do have access to those, degen tokens, but they don't have access to the TradFi. So one reason to get a large network of publishers is simply so that you can source pricing for all the different assets that people care about. The second reason is that you actually want to have many different sources for the same feed, right? So Pyth has, obviously multiple publishers per feed. Used to be 32, now it's up to 64. And so the more publishers that you get on any given feed, the more robust that feed is, in the sense that it's harder to manipulate. Meaning, if you have 10 publishers, the way that the Pyth aggregation algorithm works is that you basically have to you have to compromise over half of them, right? So you'd have to compromise 6 of them. Actually, well, let's say it's 11 publishers. So you'd have to compromise 6 of them in order to manipulate the Pyth price, right? So if you go from say 11 to 30, right, that's a big difference in terms of how many people have to be compromised. So that's an improvement to security. And it's also an improvement to reliability, right? Because, people they're running computer systems, they can go offline for various reasons, right? They're not perfect. And so the more publishers you have, the more reliable the feed is, meaning the more uptime that you're going to have as well.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for the thorough explanation here. And maybe from publisher, we can segue into what was the big hype, or let's say big revelation of last month of November. So Pyth announced its retrospective airdrop, token launch, and now staking and governance is live. Would you mind kind of explaining us, like, how does these events contribute to the long-term success of the protocol and its sustainability? Because arguably the past 2 years it worked without, now it has. Like, what's next?
Well, if you're really interested in hearing about this topic, you should come to my keynote tomorrow, where I'm going to talk all about governance. But to foreshadow that a little bit here, as Marc mentioned, a couple of weeks ago, Pyth, the token came out, decentralized governance went live. And this is a big step in the protocol, because this means that Pyth is truly a fully decentralized protocol. So the Pyth token is a governance token where you can stake it to participate in Pyth governance. And Pyth governance actually controls everything about Pyth, right? It controls the software, it controls the feeds that are listed, it controls the publishers, everything, right? So this really is a big milestone in any project to reach that decentralization stage. And that's basically where we are now, right?
Thank you. For those who don't know, this whole governance will happen on Solana. This is SPR token. What was the reason for you to stay on Solana? And maybe we'll punt it to Mike this time.
The initial application was built on Solana. There was a lot of exploration into other blockchains during the early days, both from running an aggregation as well as exploring in the governance. I'd say that back in 2021, the common view was that most governance was done on Ethereum or EVM, but you can do other things very specific on other chains. And over the time, especially during the kind of the split to having Pyth launch its own SVM, that was when we really evaluated the different technologies that would be most suitable. Like, there was no reason why Pyth needed to stay on Solana at that point. We were effectively starting from scratch, so we could build on any environment. We tested them all out. We thought that the Solana environment was most suited for the design that PythNet was setting out to do. And in order for us to have like a seamless transition, we had to figure out, well, where is governance going to live? And I think it was just the fact that we had a lot of the embedded knowledge with Solana, testing it out, and we now had new tools, some of the Realm stuff that was built, and it felt like it was the right fit for us. From a community perspective, we didn't think we would be hamstrung at all. We thought that the Solana community was robust, but also the narrative around Pyth being cross-chain was strong enough. So people that wanted to be multi-chain would be willing to come. We thought they would be willing to come to Solana. We found that to be the case. So as a point of reference, there were 90,000 wallets that were available to receive the airdrop, the retroactive airdrop. That was based on activities on 27 blockchains that were live at the time of the airdrop. We've seen over 60% of those already claimed today. You had to claim and get an SPL token. So, that thesis of, I think if it's important enough, and we think Pyth is important enough as a piece of infrastructure, people are going to be willing to move to the environment, even if it didn't have the most robust community of people participating in governance. Although I feel like that's starting to happen in Solana today.
No, amazing. And talking about future plans, and it is one question we have in the chat, so you mentioned earlier today, so the PythNet price feed, PythNet is a SVM chain, so pretty much a fork of Solana with some tweaks. was done for the speed throughput that the SVM brings. TradFi still goes like way faster than this. Is there a way where you feel that Pyth could achieve that performance?
I'll take that.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally. So I think that's definitely an interesting thing, and it's something that we are thinking about. We have looked at other technology options that could bring down the update speed from 400 milliseconds to sub-milliseconds. So we've looked at some some zero knowledge technology and things like that, where you basically have to. So one of the challenges with going below 400 milliseconds is that if you're participating in some sort of decentralized consensus process, like on a blockchain, this is pretty much like as fast as you can get, right? Like there are some speed of light limitations for how long it takes for a validator on one side of the earth to send an update to the other side of the earth, which is like pretty close to 400 milliseconds. So you're kind of, if you're using that decentralized consensus technology, you're not going to get too much faster than that. But there are other approaches like zero knowledge, where you can basically have a single server, so you don't have to have decentralized consensus, but it's still trusted, right? So we have explored some approaches like that. It's possible that something like that is kind of the future of the protocol. But that said, at the moment, since 400 milliseconds is about as fast as your blockchain can get, like if you're putting these updates on another blockchain, doesn't really matter if you're faster than that. You know what I mean? So so for the moment, I feel like it's maybe not the most important thing to worry about.
Makes great sense. And I think, again, you mentioned it quickly before, and it will be great for those who missed your keynote. And they should definitely in the future look the recording. But would you mind also like recapping the few like product kind of extension announcements you made in your keynote? Because the expansion of, I think most of the people know that Pyth is 400 price feeds for the blockchains. What if it would be more in 2024?
For sure. So I talked about a few different things in the keynote. So on the price feeds line, I'm trying to remember. One of the things I talked about was kind of on this decentralization vein, which is there's now basically third parties for Hermes offerings. So if you use PythNet price feeds, you've interacted with Hermes. It's an RPC basically for Pyth, and basically you can now get RPCs from Triton One or P2P. This should be a big win for reliability and cost and operational ease for a lot of folks. We've rolled out some latency improvements. We've increased the number of publishers. Just trying to think about all the things. There's on-chain market hours. New feeds, new blockchains as usual. Some of the new chains are Near, Stacks, Chiliz, Ronin. There's a few more. We have some benchmarks improvements as well. Yeah, so we have provably unique price updates on the blockchain. So this means if you have a time, there's like a single price for every feed at that time. So this is nice if you want to do settlement or something like that. There was something else about benchmarks. Oh, we've got some nice charting library integration. So it's really easy to make, candle charts on your website using benchmarks. And then we have a new random number protocol called Entropy that's live in some test nets right now. So, we're excited about that one. We're really trying to get into a new market here.
Yeah, I think GameFi, or however the protocol will use randomness, like becoming greater by the day, whether it's on-chain, like we've seen it with the Rollbit, anything on-chain casino, NFT mint. So quite excited to see Pyth going outside, expanding also beyond DeFi. And earlier we just mentioned, so we saw that going to a sub-millisecond price feed is not like arguably possible, or at least would introduce some other trade-off. You just mentioned Hermes, so direct connection to the to PythNet to get directly the price feeds. Is there some like upcoming kind of improvements toward the price feeds? More specifically, like, I don't know, TWAPs, or like where are you looking at? Oh, one question we get often is gas costs. Where do you think we're going this way?
Well, There were a lot of different attributes that you touched on there, but I guess from the highest possible level, I think one of the things that we at Douro Labs think a lot about is, how to improve the, price feeds on kind of all the dimensions that are relevant. And so, some of those dimensions are like latency, like accuracy, like security, like reliability, verification costs, right? So there's a bunch of these different dimensions, and we definitely think about what investments we can make in changing the protocol or whatever that kind of improve things on those dimensions, right? So I mentioned that like we saved 400 milliseconds of latency with an update just recently, right? So there's some things like that we're doing that are sort of these more incremental changes. One of the bigger changes that's happened somewhat recently is this Perseus network upgrade, which has basically changed the way that price updates are constructed so that they're much more efficient to verify on the blockchain. So this has brought down like the verification cost by something like 30 to 90%, depending on how many updates you're doing at the same time. So, that's like another area that we think about. There's probably other things we can do there to bring down the cost even further. But it's kind of to be determined what those are.
Cool. And another question we had in the chat, if we tune it down, overall people do wonder, because the Pyth price feeds today are permissionless to integrate with. How does Pyth network kind of work, practically speaking, for developers? How can people integrate, and how can the Pyth network sustain itself, generate revenue?
So if you're interested in this topic, you should tune into my keynote tomorrow, where I will talk about the sustainability of the Pyth network and what economics could look like. But I will give it a sneak preview of that today. So the Pyth network is fully permissionless. You can grab a price, and you don't need to talk to anybody at Douro Labs, Pyth Data Association, or any other chats. You can just go to the repo and start using the feeds directly. However, whenever you pull a price feed onto a different chain, part of the integration requires you to pay a Pyth fee. Those Pyth fees are currently placeholders, so they're set to one-way equivalent. So the lowest update on the various blockchains based on the gas. Now that model basically is designed to give Pyth the ability to charge more meaningful fees in the future, and potentially test out that as an economics model, and also to prove that people are willing to pull data on directly. And so we've seen the growth of this to over now 3 million updates being pulled with fees every single day today. And I'll get into more details about that tomorrow.
Looking forward, and I think quite some people will attend because this is a recurring questions. We're drawing to the end of the AMA. Maybe one thing we can finish on is, like, we're also coming close to the end of year, holiday season. Out of 2023, is there one thing, could be couple, that been grateful for and something you're looking for next year?
Jayant, you go.
Jayant, first.
Boy, that's a good question. 2023 has been a crazy year. It's been huge in the world of Pyth. I mean, if you go back to December 2022, and I remember where we are in December 2022, which was like we had kind of launched cross-chain. No one was really using it, but it was theoretically possible. We hadn't really marketed it. Like, if you go from there to where we are today with hundreds of protocol integrations on other blockchains, like the token is live. I mean, there's so much to be grateful for in what's happened in Pyth that like it's just like I don't know. I honestly sometimes look at it and like I can't believe the year that we've had. It's like it's really been amazing, and it's been a great journey. So I'm very, very happy with that. I'm assuming you want a Pyth answer to that question. I mean, I'm grateful for other things in my life as well, but not sure you guys want to hear about my family or whatever.
2023 was great. How do we make next year even better, you think? Keep going.
Oh man. I mean, I think there's still a lot of work to do. You know, I think 2024, like, there's obviously improvements we can make on, technological improvements. I think there are some big questions around governance and, how we set up some of those like social structures. That's going to be really important to the future of the protocol. So I want to make sure that, that's not something that I decide, right? That's something that the community decides. But I think we need to have some conversations and really make sure we set that up effectively. Again, that's kind of foreshadowing some of the topics of my talk tomorrow, because, we obviously have an opinion on that. But I think that's going to be a really important thing for the success of Pyth going forward. I think, getting some more protocol integrations, kind of looking forward to kind of seeing how Entropy does in the marketplace, kind of competing in a new area. I think that's going to be really cool. So a lot of good stuff to do in 24.
I would agree that it was a standout year. I would identify it as a year where Pyth established itself within sort of the lexicon of general crypto infrastructure. Most people who are building are now well aware of Pyth, and have looked into how Pyth differentiates. There's a huge percentage of the market that is building things like on-chain derivatives, where Pyth has got a competitive edge to help them be successful. And so that has really started to shine and stand out. And we need to build from here, though. This is just the foundation. And so there's tons and tons and tons of work to do. That is the reason why Pyth has decentralized in the way that it did now. The foundation is set. The people that want to participate and direct the future of Pyth can do so now. It's open; anybody can join. And that's the idea. It's meant to be permissionless. It's meant to be equitable. If you can show up with good ideas, those ones should win. What I hope happens is that Pyth continues to push the envelope and innovate. 100 institutions, all from the professional trading and exchange world, is really exciting. In 2024, I'd love to see even more categories of institutions joining, and I'd love to see that number, continue to go up. It's been a trend that has been very persistent, but I think there's a lot of room for it to become, much, much greater in the future if things are done right, and people start to continue to adopt to this idea about Pyth being the best source of combining market data together and making it available for all blockchains.
Cool. Thank you so much, both of you, Jayant, Mike. It's almost 45 minutes in. Let's not delay the next talk. Thanks again for taking the time answering the questions. Anyone listening, if you've missed a bit, it will be recorded and available. We have on the next panel, or actually it's a keynote, today's a keynote day. Would you happen to know, Mike or Jayant, before we close, who's following us after?
I believe we've got Eric from Injective.
Exactly. So Eric from Injective, wonderful team, wonderful person, wonderful protocol. They've been killing it likely the most active Cosmos chain, powered by Pyth. So be sure to tune in. And thanks again, everyone, for the time. See you around.